Hey, you all, welcome to 15 Minutes with Dad, the healing series. I am the creator of 15 Minutes with Dad. This platform was initially created to help heal families and heal fathers with their children's relationships over time, like, all that good stuff. But I've come to find out that I needed to heal myself. And so this is the healing, my part of the healing. What kind of healing series would it be if I haven't done it as well and you get to experience and enjoy me on my journey to healing as well? So here we are. Thank y'all for joining. If you want to hear more or watch more, we have all these different parts of 15 Minutes with Dad platform. We have me and my daughters, our podcast portion. We have the Fatherhood Speak series, and we also have the Healing series. So if you are more interested into what 15 Minutes with Dad is, you can visit us at 15minuteswithdad.com. You can also take the pledge, 15minuteswithdad.com, and you can watch our episodes at 15minuteswithdad.com and or Spotify, all the streaming services. So you can find us on TikTok at 15 Minutes with Dad, Facebook 15 Minutes with Dad as well. So let's get into it. I have recently been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And before I got into that thing, before I even go into how or where or when, I'm going to tell you essentially what it is in the best way that I can possibly explain it. Because, so borderline personality disorder is essentially imagine a person going through trauma in their childhood and having to process that trauma as a child. And in processing that as a child, you don't really have an understanding about the nuances of the world. So you blame yourself. You take it in on yourself and you feel like you're going to be abandoned, or you feel like, basically overarching is that you're afraid to engage in things, or you do things to avoid feeling abandoned or avoid feeling rejected. And it happens due to sometimes childhood PTSD. And so that's just the baseline, right? There's so many, you can Google so much information about borderline personality. There's different types of borderline personality disorder. There's the loud type, the narcissistic type. I am the silent type. And I'll explain to you how that's developed over time. But here we are at 34 years old, discovering that I have borderline personality disorder. So let's talk about how I discovered it. And this is going to be difficult for me to talk about, so just bear with me as I go through it. I discovered it on a whim almost, right? Because I was in an argument, or I was in an argument with my girlfriend, and we were having a conversation about I was trying to explain and voice when I got upset. And I was like, hey, like, when I made this mistake, I ended up so I made a mistake and I sent the wrong person $1,000. I was supposed to cash app this to my girlfriend, because we were taking care of bills and stuff, and I was sending it to her. My girlfriend's name is Alma, and then I have this friend that's named Alma who still have to pay my money back. We still got to figure that whole thing out. What's up with my money? Anyways, so I sent this wrong person $1,000, and I was morbidly upset. So much so that I became hyper analytical about my partner. And she was like, hey, we'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. But I was like, no, we needed that for bills. I just like wasted $1,000. I'm like so upset, like blah, blah, blah. And she was like, no, we're good. Like, just don't do the mistake again. And I'm hyper analyzing and I'm starting to create a problem. Like trying to see if she's going to treat me how I feel about myself. And I felt that I didn't deserve to be loved because I made a big mistake. And and I was telling her, like, when you did this, it made me feel like you didn't love me. And she was like, no, I was just walking upstairs. I didn't really have a problem with you. It was just walking upstairs. And I was like, but you walked away from me while I was feeling. I was like, I was really creating this situation in my head that did not exist. And then I partnered up with a time when my daughter got upset with me when I told her no about something. She got really upset with me and it messed me up for like 3 days. And so I'm putting all these different pieces together. And in that moment, while I'm telling my girlfriend, like, hey man, look, I was upset when you did this thing and it made me feel like I didn't deserve to be loved. Like you made me feel like I shouldn't be loved. And then she was like, no, I love you. I wouldn't do that thing. And I was like, holy crap, that's a trigger. I was like, oh my God. I do that often. And because I remember talking about maybe months ago, I was like, I don't feel like I feel like if I do something wrong, the family just disowns me and don't love me. But in fact, they're just having regular emotions for something that they probably didn't like. But it's very minute. But I took it and I blew it up and I personalize it. And then I get depressed about it. Right. And I do this often and often. And so I realized that in the middle of a heated of an argument, I literally said, like, oh my God, that's my trigger. I was like, wait. That's my trigger. And so I started researching that trigger. Now it's not going to be the same way for everybody because I'm a mentalist, and so I think about how my mind works very, very often. Um, but I was like, yo, that's my trigger, and so I went to research more about it, um, specific to the situation and how I felt. And I started going through, it was depression, it was like all these different words, bipolar, blah blah blah, and I didn't I was already researching about borderline personality for other reasons, but it was like there's this silent type of borderline personality disorder where the person have this self-hate talk, right? And I'm going to talk to you throughout this entire series about how that self-hate talk, that feeling of abandonment or that feeling of not deserving to be loved may seem like that's what the world is, but in fact, a lot of us are really creating that reality. And I'm going to tell you how it impacts different forms of my life from inside of me and outside of me. But what I'm telling you guys is that there was this whole narrative that I live in at any given time. Like I try to be perfect in everything that I do. I have this thing about like trying to make sure that the quality of everything I do is absolutely perfect. And if it's not perfect, it doesn't get done. And it also stems to a lot of things that I was like, yo, I was kind of self-diagnosed ADHD for a very long time because I done research. I was like, yo, I got ADHD. But then when I started understanding borderline personality and how they connect so directly, and like 95% of the people that are diagnosed with ADHD are diagnosed with borderline personality and the opposite the other way. So I'm like, yo, like I've been suffering with all this stuff and I thought it was like just a mental disorder when in fact I have this trauma that is still embedded in my nerves. Like, and it borderline personality also affects my success. So when I try to figure out why am I successful in things that I do, it's also affected by the borderline personality disorder. It's crazy. And I'm going to talk to you. Just stick with me because it's it's complex. And I'm going to try to simplify it the best way that I understand it and give you all the nuances of this thing, right? So when we're talking about when I accepted that this was a thing. I went and signed up for therapy specifically for BPD. So I went to this EMDR session, and that's a therapy that I'm taking. This was referred to me about a year or 2 years ago by a buddy of mine who's big in male mental health. And he's a psychologist. I think he's a psychologist, psychiatrist. I have to figure that out. But he's very big on male mental health. And I was explaining to him how I overcame depression in an unorthodox way, right? Like I didn't go to a therapist to overcome depression. I did hypnosis. I did mindfulness. I did meditation. I did affirmations. I did this whole other process of trying to overcome depression without therapy. I was broke at the time. Probably wasn't. I kind of could have used my insurance. I don't know. But I overcame depression. I thought that I was good. And I explained this to him. I was like, yeah, like I went through all this stuff and I'm very passionate about mental health. Like I overcame depression. Um, and when I feel triggered, I do these things and I call them anti-triggers, right? I do these when I get feel triggered, I go and I do these things to calm myself down and bring myself to it. And he was like, brother. And when somebody give you brother, they about to lay it on you. And he said some very simple words. He was like, you shouldn't be triggered. Your triggers should not exist. You need to work on that. And I was like, what do you mean my triggers? I thought this was a for life thing. Like whatever happened, happened. It is what it is. It's a for life thing. It's not. So he told me that 2 years ago. And I thought like, yo, I'm good. I was single at the time, right? And it wasn't until I got into a relationship that I realized how much work I have not done. Because at that time in that relationship, I know that I think young Jeezy, what's his name, Jeezy, and was in a uh, um, a podcast or a talk, and they said something that rang with me in my head, lives rent free in my head. But basically, he said um, that you're not like intimacy is the door to your trauma, or intimacy is like exposes your trauma. You don't really know how deep your trauma is until you become intimate with someone. And so need I mind you, I think I'm good, right? And I'm in this relationship and we've been together for about 2 years. And there are all these moments where I'm triggering my girlfriend and she's triggering me, and we understand that we both have a really traumatic childhood, right? But in my case, I didn't think I was triggered. I didn't think that the triggers were a problem until they started getting a really big problem, and I was going into these mental states and I was blaming her. I'm like, yo, you making me depressed, like you making me sad. In reality, it's my triggers. I didn't focus on my triggers. Um and so here we are. I am in EMDR therapy, which means wait, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And essentially this is a scientifically proven way that people with PTSD usually go through to overcome their trauma. It's very trauma. And then we're partnering that with this thing called DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. Um, and this is what my treatment's going to be, right? And I'm going to talk to you guys about the trauma. This is the first episode of this series, and so I'm going to try and talk through the traumatic experience. I'm going to try and talk to you guys as deep as I possibly can to really heal, but you heal with me by relating to the things that I'm talking about. So thank y'all for joining me for the first episode of 15 Minutes with Dad, Healing with Lyric. And I see you guys in the next episode.